where would you like to begin?
Well, perhaps we can begin at the message you sent me about this doctor. The book.
Yeah. All that I sent you is that I think is irrelevant from the comment you mentioned. I sent it to you because it seems that the mind is locked into the idea that the thoughts or the mind is required a brain, and that the mind does not continue without a physical form. And the truth of the matter, it doesn't really matter, because at least what the knowledge is pointing is being liberated from identification with the body and the mind, and that's what matters. So it's less important the philosophical discussion whether the mind can exist without a physical form or not. It's more of what is the experience on a daily life when you identify, or anybody identifies with their ideas and beliefs. Do they feel tension and fear and stress, or do they experience an unchanging peace within them that is not affected by anything, no matter what happens? Because that's what transforms one's life, not the understanding whether the mind continues without a body or exists when there's no brain, and so forth. I thought that you might find it interesting, and that's why I sent you the name of the book. I glanced at the book because somebody gave it to me, and all I saw that it was still all a projection of the mind, being lost in a dream, just on a subtle dream, that's all. Nothing to do with the physical form. And we can see that as a human being, we go through the three states of waking state, dreaming state, and deep sleep state, which the waking state is a gross body, the dreaming state is a subtle body, and the deep sleep state is a causal body. So he was referring to a subtle body, wandering and traveling in different worlds and seeing different entities on the subtle, just like in a dream, without any connection to the brain, because something was happening to his brain. That's all.
Well, I guess you've taken my arguments away. For me, the book, which I have read, and you know, he's been certainly in the medical community quite a controversy, because it's certainly well established, and I know you don't want to dwell on the factual elements of what happens neurologically in a brain that's either dying, or a brain that's demented, or a brain that has Alzheimer's disease, or a brain that has a stroke, but it forms the basis of perhaps not a philosophical argument, but a rational, phenomenological perspective, which I can't seem to erase, because the basis of my thinking from my day-to-day clinical experience is that we're simply biological robots, you know, that it's increasingly understood. The philosophical approach, where everything is an illusion, is quite correct from a biological perspective as well. You know, there is the illusion of seeing, there's the illusion of hearing. Sometimes you block out things, sometimes you don't see things that are there. There's the illusion of knowledge, there's the illusion of cause and effect, and increasingly we realize the tricks that the mind plays. But at the end of the day, it's still a biological phenomenon. And your point of view that that one must rest the mind or remove oneself from the shackles of the mind leads to the question, who is it that is unshackling? Because there's still a reporter, there's still a witness, there's still something that is reporting an awakened or an enlightened or an illumined mind. There's still somebody that witnesses. I listened to some of the conversations with some of the others and people who claim to have had an awakening. I mean, from a philosophical perspective, it says, well, who's the person that's had the awakening? Because there's always an I perspective in all of this. And forgive me for being very biological, the idea of consciousness itself is an illusion biologically, because we know that there's no particular part of the brain that subserves consciousness. It's a meshwork of neurons that create this I phenomenon, which we see deteriorate biologically in disease states. You'll have. We talked about it on the Skype briefly on texting. That I can have a patient today who is articulate, intelligent, educated, and is able to converse like you and I. And within 24 hours, something happens within the structure of the brain. And all of the higher function activities, insight, philosophical dialogue, orientation, awareness, all disappear at the same time. And if that is the case, it sort of translates, in my understanding, that this is just a biological phenomenon.
In terms of consciousness, what's important is that, do you experience, even for a moment or right now, an awareness that is just silent within you, that has no thoughts?
No, because the moment you attempt to seek, the moment I attempt to seek that, there is a witness to it, which is the brain trying to say, let's step back and see if there's no thought. That in itself is a thought.
And afterwards, after that question complete itself, thought appear. We have one thought at a time. You recognize that?
Yes.
So a thought appears, complete itself, disappear, another thought appears, complete itself, like frames moving really quickly. Yes?
Yes.
If one, due to practice, start to cut the frames, what happens, the speed goes down, and when the thought appears, completes itself and disappears, if there's no other thought arises, what remains is ordinary silence, which I would say it's ordinary because it's everyone's nature, yet it's extraordinary. It's actually grace itself. If there's the recognition of this silence or silent awareness, and the mind can fix the attention on that awareness, then you start to experience eternal peace. So maybe for someone like you, it's just to begin to experience this glimpse of peace, and the more you are drawn to this peace, then something opens. And the only thing that creates the illusion that there is no peace is because there's so much identification with the ideas and the beliefs that it's like a clouds that are thick, then the sun doesn't shine through. It depends what you want. Do you know what you want? It seems like you're interested in knowing who you truly are, or knowledge about the self. Are you seeking peace, and or you looking to understand? There's a difference between the two. Peace is an experience. Understanding is of the mind.
Well, they're both words, and they both have definitions, so they both arise from the mind.
Let me stop you for a second. Let's examine that. Yeah? Whether it's from the mind or not, do you have occasions that you just stop and you experience just something, you experience silence? Glimpses of
Yes. Yes.
It's an experience, or you imagine it?
It's an experience, but it's a state. It's a state of the mind.
Let's keep it that it is a state of the mind. Would you be interested of more of that state of mind or less? Because in the Buddhism sometimes they call it that the self or this peace is a state of mind for a beginner seeker, so they won't have any conflict. So, or they call it mindfulness, that the mind is full of illumination, full of peace, full of silence, or full of presence. It's just words that are pointing to the experience, and in the experience words cannot enter. It's just an experience. And then the mind comes back and interpret the experience mentally with thoughts and words. Yes?
Sure.
Okay. So I bring back the question. What interests you? What is your yearning and calling? Is it for this whatever peace, joy, happiness that is experienced, or the understanding and philosophy about it? Because in the philosophy there would be arguments about it. In the experience there won't be any thought that argues. There would be just the peace that everyone is looking for, the happiness that everyone is looking for, the joy that everyone is looking for, the silence that everyone is looking for.
I guess the answer to that is, for me, that they're intertwined. I can't tease out or dissect away my yearning to understand who I am. At the same time, with today's frontiers in medicine, it constantly draws me back to the findings of the neuroscientists and the neurophysiologists about how the brain functions and how the brain behaves in a very similar manner to which Buddhist philosophy espouses, that everything is an illusion and that your mind deludes you or eludes you into perceiving things that are not really there. And the proximity of where science meets philosophy intrigues me, because with today's imaging technology, for example, we're beginning to understand the way the mind deceives itself. What I am trying to extract from our conversations as well as from my reading, which you've introduced me to, is there really something beyond the mind and the brain which you espouse, or is it simply a product that the mind is generating to satisfy itself that there is something beyond the mind? Now, again, perhaps I've answered your question in a very circuitous manner. That my yearning is to understand what is it that I am. Because as a physician, and as you've already said, sometimes experiences are illusory. They're projections of the mind. And you may have an experience, but it's an entirely illusory experience. One can create through drugs, one can create through electrode stimulation in the brain, colleagues of mine are working on areas of memory where you can insert a probe and you send an electric current in a particular part of the memory structure, and memories that you never thought you had lost all come back. Your experience as a 2-year-old or your 3-year-old, the smells and the sounds and what have you. Now, that tells me that a lot of the things that we create in our mind are illusory and biological phenomena. I'm not sure if I'm digging myself into a grave here, but do you get my...
Yes, I agree that all the thoughts that the mind is creating is an illusory. One thing that one has to come to see, and they would come to see whenever they do, is that the experience of awareness does not satisfy the mind, because the mind dies into that awareness, dies from its identification with the body and the mind. The mind doesn't want to rest into awareness. It is addicted to get attached to thought and get lost in the illusion of the world, in the illusion of the thoughts, like dreaming. So the mind is not satisfied from awareness. It's like the more enlightened the being it is, the less thoughts or the less of the world they have. So the more you lose the world, the more enlightened you are. So it doesn't satisfy the mind. The mind has to give up its ideas and beliefs, and that the mind that is driven by its identity from it doesn't want to. It's not an easy task for the mind to rest in the self. Don't misunderstand. It's the contrary. It's so rare, and it's the mind can rest in awareness, and there's a recognition, and the next moment there's a forgetfulness, and then the mind identify with its ideas and belief to be real, and get lost and just in the world of illusion. So awareness doesn't satisfy the mind, and the mind can never be satisfied from any objects of the world. What happens is that when the mind rests and dissolves into awareness, that the conditioning, the habits, what they call vasanas, dissolve, then what remains is eternal peace, and there's no one to enjoy it, because this eternal peace is you. I don't know if you read Ramana Maharshi, any of his material, the books or anything. You read any?
Yes.
And there's another guy, Annamalai Swami, that he talks about final talks. It's a nice book. And take a look again at the non-dual reality. I don't know if you read it or not.
No.
Even there he talks about the superimposition and the first veiling, and he says the veiling of the mind is of two kinds. I can read you the first. He talks about in the veiling, and this is the book, the non-dual, the lamp of non-dual knowledge. Yes. And he talked, the first topic he's speaking about is superimposition. Superimposition, in a simple way, we superimpose attributes on objects that the objects don't even have. So I buy a car, I'm happy. Somebody steals the car, I'm unhappy. I superimpose the happiness or unhappiness on the piece of metal and plastic that doesn't have happiness or unhappiness. That's a form of superimposition. Simple way.
Yeah, hold that thought. Just hold that thought. That's absolutely true. That's absolutely true. But one doesn't need the depths. I haven't read the book, but just coming at it from a purely biological perspective, is what I'm saying, that we understand the same thing biologically, that attachment, that emotion, that anger, that, we know that, I'm a cardiologist, that half of the heart disease that we see is self-imposed by thoughts of stress, and that stress comes from a thought. And that drives up your adrenaline and drives up your cortisol, and it gives you heart disease and blood pressure and diabetes. We know all these things. And we know it from a biological perspective that your mind, the mind tortures itself, eventually translating that mental torture into physical manifestation.
Okay.
One doesn't need to have philosophical insight to understand that today, because we now know the pathways that result in all of this.
Okay.
When you're depressed, you eat badly, you smoke, you take alcohol, you don't exercise, all coming from stress. So all of these things are clearly understood without philosophy. But it is still the mind that is doing itself. To say to oneself, and that's where I'm a little stuck, that okay, one steps back and watches this. Neuroscientists are still saying, who is it? Is it the mind deluding itself by creating this sort of supermind that says, okay, let's watch yourself? It's like the Freudian, the id and the super-id and the superego. These are all constructs by the same neurological process, albeit the higher cerebral cortex, that's creating this structure to say, well, watch yourself, see what you did, look at the mess you've got yourself into, look how tightly your nappy is knotted now.
Okay. What's wrong about, let's assume, and I go with that theory that it's the mind, and then there's the supermind gets it to see all the mess of the lower mind, I would say. So now we'd say, if you open the Viveka, they talk about the lower mind and the higher mind. Lower mind is the ego that identifies with the physical body. The higher mind is what they call the buddhi, higher intelligence, that discriminates and determines the true nature of objects in the mind. So the higher mind has a higher intelligence than the lower mind. The lower mind is actually ego driven. The higher mind questions the ego. So if the higher mind awakens and brings more clarity into one's life, I see it's beneficial.
Sure, it is. But the argument that I have, and it's not an argument, the observation that I have is what happens to an individual that can't think? What happens to, where is this awareness that one talks about in patients that are demented? How does one have the same conversation about insight and awareness and resting in mindfulness in somebody that has a neurocognitive deficit? There isn't anything.
We wouldn't be able to know unless you experience it directly, isn't it?
That's a cop-out. If you have it's simply an observation, Alon, that you will have somebody today that, an example comes to mind. I have a patient who was a professor of physics, and a couple of weeks ago he had a stroke affecting the part of the brain that's got to do with higher learning. And today you cannot even you can barely construct a sentence and conversation with him. Now one wonders if there is awareness, if there is something beyond the mind and the brain, where is it in this particular individual that
it's the conversation failed. Yeah. So we can pick up from where we were.
Yes.
It's because I can never experience somebody else, I won't be able to understand what's going on for him or another. It's like I cannot understand another being experience. I can only project my understanding or interpretation of his experience. And the experience is the ultimate. It's the direct experience one is having. Therefore, it's not that I'm trying to cap out. It's just that I cannot know. I can just share with you my projected idea when I realize that my projections are distorted most of the time anyhow. Because I project that the sun is rising and the sun is setting and it's not moving. I'm projecting that the sky is blue when the sky doesn't have color. So when one examines their thoughts sincerely, then they see that you cannot rely and trust what the mind is telling itself. Because a lot of time it distorts the information. It distorts the facts by forming an idea about the fact itself. So I cannot know. And more important is that just see if you can recognize glimpses of recognition of awareness within you, and recognize that there is no movement of thought, and then suddenly a thought appears and grabs your attention, and just shift the attention to an awareness that is just omnipresent without analyzing it. Is it the mind, not the mind? Because then it's thoughts coming in and disturbing this peace. And the more you experience peace, then you're in harmony with what is, even with the objects of the world, with what is happening around you. Then you can be more clear, that's all. Just in a simple way. And let this take you in, instead of just trying to understand. And you can simultaneously try to understand what's going on with science and philosophy, yet the experience is what counts. There is a story that I like to read. Maybe I bring the book, I'll read the story to all of us. Oh, it's Annamalai Swami. It's a, yeah.
The philosophy you talk about is solipsism, which basically is you can't tell what anybody else is experiencing because you are not that person, which makes a little bit of a point. Well, I think it's a very egotistical argument. The sort of solipsistic approach that I only exist, nobody else exists because I only know myself. It's a sort of Kantian Descartes notion. But if we start from that perspective, Alon, then I don't think we get much further forward in discussion. Man is a social animal. We discuss, we talk, we philosophize, we meet. Biologically, we're not supposed to be isolated species. And the purpose of relating experiences is how society grows, surely.
So what do you suggest?
No, I'm just saying, your point is well taken that your experience can only be your own. But if we just left it like that, we wouldn't progress, because the point of scientists discussing or doctors discussing is to come up with a more unified approach in management of disease or approach to salvation or enlightenment. I mean, that's the purpose of discussion. Even though your experience cannot be translated and inserted in my brain, there is a.
This is why.
Doesn't mean you don't.
This is why there's time to speak and discussion, and there's time to be still and quiet, and to look within, because all the wisdom is from within. So This is where we go to a retreat and we are silent for 10 days, 30 days, 20 days, some 1 year. It doesn't matter. That they go in and they really watch what arises within them, and they direct their attention within. And then they can come out and share what they saw, experience. And this is where language would come to a point that it is a barrier and turns to be an obstacle. It's not an aid anymore. So it's an aid up to a particular point and turns to an obstacle from then on. It depends where we stay. Do we only stay on the words, philosophy, or do we actually want to go deeper and experience something that is beyond words?
But that experience is still a chemical phenomenon.
Sounds great to me, as long as the experience is peace. It can be all the chemicals. Actually, it's energetically too. One can experience it throughout the whole head. It would be very interesting to connect a physical body when they experience the state of beingness. What happens with all the neurons, all the everything scientifically? What happens with the right and left side of the brain when there is an experience of eternal peace? Nobody connected this form, so I don't know. Although I can recognize that there is an experience, that there is more, the present just washes the body, and there is a presence that affects the right and left side of the brain and the face and the whole. It can be the whole physical form. You get saturated in it. Now one can say it's all imaginary in the mind. It is an experience. And let's say it's imagined, it's a pleasant or it's beyond pleasant experience. Means none of the experiences that I've experienced through the senses externally come closer to this direct experience. And I recognize that it's peaceful. There's no excitement. It's not high and low. It's stable. It's changeless. And it's always available if the attention is on it. It's not available when the attention is on the thoughts, ideas and beliefs, or when I am focused about the past and the future. So it's ordinary. This is why I ask people, what are they looking for? Understanding would not give you the experience. The understanding would quiet the mind from its doubts so it can rest into this eternal peace.
Sure, I agree with everything that you say, but I would still emphasize that it's a neurobiological experience.
Sounds good. This idea sounds good because I recognize when I experience the silence of awareness, this idea is gone.
What idea?
Of this is narrow biological phenomena, and it's of the brain, and it's all of the story.
No, hey, I'm just putting it into words, but I mean, this is perhaps not the venue to discuss it, but I mean, you talk about these experiments, they are being done. I mean, it's called transcranial magnetic stimulation, where you actually put magnets on different parts of the brain and you can arouse feelings of joy, feelings of depression, because you're altering neurochemistry in parts of the brain that are responsible for emotion, called the amygdala. And
I'm talking about awareness.
Sure.
The thoughtless state of mind.
Sure. There are also studies being done on, as you're well aware, monks who've meditated for years and years and years to see how the brain changes. But it is still the brain that is changing. If you look at a monk that has been meditating for more than 10,000 hours, there are certain changes in particular parts of the brain that we believe now are responsible for that emotion of unity, that oceanic oneness that people talk about. Equally, there are studies that show that certain parts of the brain in epileptics misfire and give them a sense that they've seen God and they've seen lights and they've seen divinity. Again, drawing back to the same conclusion, I think, that all of these phenomena, whether it's a state of awareness, whether it's a state of peace, whether it's a state of anger, are generated internally from parts of the brain. No?
Maybe stimulated from the mind. Because if I go back to your conclusion of what the medical and anyone who observe themselves recognize, that the state of the mind affects the body. For heart attack, heart disease, different. So if it's the mind affecting the physical body, because the way it goes with cause and effect, thought, when you identify it, is the cause, the effect is an emotion. Emotion is always a physical reaction in the body, turns to be the cause, and the effect is reactivity of negative thoughts in the mind. So now we see a whole closed circle, right?
Sure.
Yet the first phenomena was the thought that caused the physical. So if I take it to thought and the brain, I say, okay, who is first? So sometimes would be the thought would be first, and then there would be the effect would be physical. And sometimes we see somebody get damage in the brain, and the brain turns to be the cause now, and the gap, or there's lack of thinking or lack ability to communicate mentally is the effect. Yes, we see that.
Yes.
Yeah. So
but the mind and the brain are one.
Okay.
The brain creates the mind.
That's okay. If the brain creates the mind, what does it mean? So when the body dies, there's no more mind. So
yes.
A human being basically is born, and you don't think there's reincarnation. There's one birth.
Absolutely.
One birth.
Absolutely.
Okay. And I guess you've never seen past lives of yours. You never seen it. You never experienced it.
No, there will be projections of my mind.
Yeah, that's obvious.
If I did.
That's clear.
I mean, you know, Alon, when I'm operating and the anesthetist gasses somebody, okay, to put them to sleep, you can actually count and observe when that brain loses consciousness and loses its mind because it's not aware. If you ask the person questions that are insightful, that require thinking, you can actually grade when the mind disappears as a result of putting the brain into a state of deep sleep.
So how come there's so many evidence today? Sometimes there's a child, they anesthetized her, they did an operation. When she woke up, she told them exactly the inside of her body, exactly what they did, everything. She saw it from above. How come you explain that?
Because I can't explain it, but the rational argument is that there are certain states that certain individuals in whom the anesthetic doesn't work as effectively at the dose that you're expected to. So they are pain-free, but they are still consciously aware.
Except that she was totally asleep. Do some research. She was asleep. The anesthesia worked on her perfectly. She came out, she told them exactly the inside of hers, which she never saw, even if she wasn't anesthetized fully. She couldn't see the inside. Because she was above, she saw them exactly what was happening in the operating room, exactly what they did, exactly everything. How would you explain that?
I can't explain that particular one, but I have individuals who have that, and in 9 times out of 10, we've worked out that it is simply that we didn't put them to sleep, or the mind was still awake and listening to the conversations of the surgeons, and before the patient was gassed, they were aware of who was where and what. they can hear sounds of needles and cutting instruments. There are lots of rational explanations for it. I can't explain the one you talk about, but in the majority, it is my opinion, it has been scientifically explained. I'm not arguing, even if there is a projection of somebody above themselves and what have you, it's still, I believe, a biological phenomenon. Now, for me, the purpose of chatting to you is simply also to reaffirm that it doesn't detract from the philosophical argument of resting in awareness, of being, because I see the advantages. Just in my, I'm a very practical person. On a day-to-day basis, I see it. If we give advice to patients, you show them the mirror to say, look, this is how you're behaving. This is what it's done to you. If you take an alcoholic and you say, this is what it's done to your liver, this is what it's done to your marriage, this is what it's done to your children, and you get them to see it and to step back. It's a sort of a neurocognitive behavioral approach in terms of being mindful. I don't want to use a philosophical or religious term, just to say, just watch what you're doing. And I think that in itself provides benefit without having to use, higher minds and awareness and unity. And it's simply a biological step-by-step approach to say, look at what you're doing and how you're killing yourself.
Yeah. This is why I say the way I live simply, the way I live life in a simple way, yes, is I discriminate internally what causes me stress and what enables me to experience peace. And I'm naturally drawn to peace. So if something causes me stress, I discriminate it, I examine it because it's in my mind, and then when I see it for what it is, to be not real, an illusion, then the mind can rest and rest in peace. So I'm drawn to peace.
But Alon, if I were to argue that there are certain traits, there are certain characters. There are angry characters, there are peaceful characters, there are angry babies, there are babies that cry at birth, and psychologists tell us that they can tell fairly predictably how a child is going to develop from the way it behaves as a baby, which has, again, arguments by behavioral psychologists that a lot of, for example, you like the peaceful approach, you like the insightful approach, you like the self-inquiry approach. What if that turns out to be a genetic trait that you have, that you've inherited, that there is a tendency in some people to seek conservatism, to seek being an introvert, to seek meditation, whereas there are other types that go out and want to set fire to things, that want to go out and misbehave. It might be a neurobiological trait, surely.
So I've been graced then.
Sorry?
I've been graced then. Graced. It's due to grace.
Grace.
Grace. Yes.
No, I think it's fine. You talk about
the thing is that I'm just like anybody else. I've seen so much anger within, and so much frustration, and so much rage internally, and had to observe it so it clears itself. And through life, I get to observe hundreds, sometimes thousands of people through the course of many years, to see that everybody have the same mechanism, exactly the same mechanism. Their personality is different, works on the same mechanism. So I realized, wow, I'm not different than them. It's just that I was able to meet it, not avoid it, being able to confront it and allow it to clear itself. So
when you say it, what is it?
the anger, the rage, the frustration, attaching to desires, avoiding pain, seeking pleasure, looking for happiness from experiences external, from objects of the world, and not being satisfying, experiencing restlessness, experiencing discontent, and then working with all of that and start to glimpsing in the beginning and experience something that is much more profound and deep, which is silence, awareness, eternal peace, whatever one wants to name it. It is an experience, it's not a concept in the mind. And then from that place, because it's absolutely still, any thought that appears as name or form or projection is seen. And then if you question that, it subsides. And the more the mind rests in awareness, that's where one tastes the nectar of life. That's all. Now one can say, this is nonsense, let me go and do some my business. Another says, leave me alone, I want to go about do my being with my family. And another says, you know what, I'm interested to be more peaceful, I'm interested to experience more harmony with what is, I'm interested to be clear with every thought that arises, I'm interested to learn how to discriminate my ideas and beliefs in an ordinary way. I just want to experience more peace. That's all. And it's what's the catalyst of all of it is the desire. So if I desire to make money, I won't desire for peace, because then when I desire a particular thing, I will put my energy and time into it. And this is why I ask people, what do you really want? What is the burning desire within? And some would say, I would like to save the world. And some would say, I would like to be clear. I'd like to experience harmony, and that way from there to help people. And some would say, I want to be angry because that motivates me to achieve what I want. Or I need the fear to motivate me to create things. And I say, all is well. Good luck, whatever one chooses. I don't think one is higher than another. I think eventually one would come to the realization that unless they really know who they are by experience, no matter what they know is lost. And the only thing that remains is their experience of their existence. Because you don't need to ask me if you exist. Because the existence is the basis of everyone's being. So nobody needs another to say, excuse me, do you know if I exist? No, the existence of who you are is fundamental. And unless I know that I am this existence, not as an idea, then I know everything. And if I know everything except that I am existence, consciousness, bliss, then I don't know anything. So this is why in the beginning someone say, this is all philosophy. Then I tell them, you might be right, it's not what I experience. This is why I'm not interested in philosophy. I'm interested to experience the peace within me, which I recognize that it is what's natural. And everything that I thought that is natural is actually ignorance. Is because I forgot who I am. And the ideas and the beliefs and the opinions I had, that was ignorance. That wasn't the natural state of the being of who I am. One would say it's only mind and it's the brain. I say, okay, within the body and the framework of this body, in this life, moment by moment, I choose to experience peace. And when I don't experience the peace, I have to examine it and not feed that energy, because then it escalates and evolves. Because if somebody is frustrated, if you have an argument with somebody and then you walk away and you keep the argument in your mind, you go out and you ask people to or you share it to validate your argument. You perpetuate it most of the time as any human being. Yet if you are in argument, you realize, whoa, this caused me tension and I'm seeking peace. Then I wouldn't go and feed this energy.
Wow. I agree, but it's still a choice. I mean, the word I keeps coming up, and then it's still I choose peace. I choose.
That's right.
Restfulness, and it's still the I.
Yes.
It's still whatever you want to call the I, whether it's a bigger I or a smaller I or a higher I. It's still the I that chooses it. But you know that you're talking about self-inquiry. It's a very difficult thing to do. But I agree with you that if you do constantly examine your thoughts, you realize that you are a victim of your own thoughts in a lot of things, whether it's the career you choose, whether it's the fact that, but sometimes, Alon, what you call your burning desire may be premeditated. You may have a predisposition towards, it's a fact of psychology that men who beat their wives have been beaten in childhood, or somebody who gets divorced is more likely to get divorced again when they remarry, or somebody who marries an abusive husband often leaves that abusive husband and marries another abusive husband. And it's because of what happened in childhood. So many of the influences and your burning desire or my burning desire is not what really is a burning desire. It's inherited from your upbringing and what influences you had, again, biologically, that determines whether you go into a particular career, whether you want to become a gambler, or whether you want to become a monk. All I'm saying, Alon, is I agree with you that self-inquiry needs to occur. But if I can just turn the tables around a little bit and say, if you yourself do it on a daily basis, how do you function in terms of emotion, attachment, your family, day-to-day activities? Because they all come to virtually zero, because they all have implications. If you apply emotion or attachment to a particular thing, individual, association, or philosophy, there are consequences to that.
So let me answer the question. First of all, I notice, and I go to the past, that I'm barely emotional. I'm not emotional, barely. And I used to be very emotional, like this, very up and down. No emotion means I notice that there is no identification with the thought, then there's no emotion, so there's no body sensation.
Exactly.
So
how do you then function?
Very simple, functioning happening by itself, just by itself. A thought can arise, I take action, I'm not emotional about it. And then I notice that even family, I just accept them as they are, and even if they want different things, I hear what they say, and I'm not reactive about it. So I experience peace, and I experience understanding, and I experience accepting them as they are without wanting anything from them. Even wanting them to be different causes me stress. So when I don't have this, I experience peace with what is, as it is, just as it is, ordinary. Also, I don't experience that I'm a victim of the thoughts, because the experience I have is that I am awareness, not the thoughts. This is what I experience. I'm awareness, not the thoughts. So I'm not anymore a victim of the thought. In the past, I was not only a victim of the thoughts, I was the slave, the grand slave. There wouldn't be any slave better than me than to my thinking when I identified with the thoughts. Yet I don't experience that anymore. And if it appears, it just noticed instantaneously and pass away. So it doesn't last more than an appearance only.
But then surely one becomes nihilistic, one becomes apathetic or lethargic towards life, because the things that drive most individuals or that drive society is indeed desire and attraction and want. They come a cropper and they are the consequences of those drives and emotions. But that is it not our biological fate that you are driven, by attraction to objects or to people or to standards and goals? If you lose that, is there no? Do you not develop an inertia towards life?
It's I can only share the experience that yes, I lose interest, and it doesn't drive me. And if there's still vasanas, habits that drive me, I watch them. And some I take actions, and some I don't. Yet none of it really lasts. So nothing really drives me. And anything that I even try or people try to create around me, I notice it doesn't last. It collapses. It destroys. Means I'm not a good creator. Not really. So anything I create, after some time I destroy. I say nonsense. I don't put energy into it. Or somebody comes with an idea. I say nice idea. You go and manifest it. I'm not interested. And then people say let's go and do that. I say you go do that. I'll be just as it is. And it doesn't make me what is the word? Apathic. Yeah. Please again? Lethargic. On the contrary, I experience aliveness, I experience presence, I experience kindness, I experience empathy, I experience understanding, and I'm serving. I'm serving people, not with the idea that I have to serve. I'm just available. And I'm available to listen and be. And another thing that I experience being fearless. Fearless means I recognize that it doesn't really matter what happens. So I welcome whatever supposed to happen. I welcome it fully. It doesn't really matter. And I live ordinary life. For somebody would be say boring. I'm interested to walk barefoot on the earth. I like to be walking on the ocean and breathe clean air and eat live, vibrant, organic foods. If it's available, and if it's not, it doesn't really matter. I don't eat meat. I don't eat chicken. I don't eat any living products. I'm not interested to kill an animal in order to be for my own addiction or satisfaction of habit. I'm not drawn to it, and I feel vibrant energy. And the most important, I experience an eternal peace, and I recognize this is me, not as an individual. It has no boundaries. And the more the mind rests in that, the more grace there is. That's all. Ordinary. Boring.
Not so ordinary, mate. But you set aside 99% of the population then. People like us who who go to work every day, who have a family, who have, perhaps wrongly needs and wants and desires. I wanted to just ask you, since we're talking about this, and you're right, that simply understanding what the mind is doing doesn't stop the mind from doing it. You know, which
This
I
is
think
just
is the
the
problem.
first step.
Excuse me?
This understanding how the mind operates is the first step. I have to stop feeding the energy to it. Like a dog, if I don't give it food, it will starve. So I have to stop feeding that energy in the mind. That's a must. Yes.
But it's that link, Alon, that often goes missing, because there are a lot of patients of mine that misbehave. But they are educated, they're articulate, they are intelligent, they can read entire books about how they should behave, but they don't do it. So the switch from understanding and self-inquiry to incorporate into your daily practice is where I see all of these things going wrong, whether it's philosophically or from a religious perspective. Everything that you say makes sense. Everything that you say about examining your thoughts and watching what they do to you makes sense. But merging the two into action is very difficult, and I think that's the problem. That you know, I'm not sure how you do it, because it would seem to me, just from the outside in, it would appear fairly sterile in terms of day-to-day activity, because nothing affects you, nothing implodes within you, nothing annoys you, irritates you, angers you, draws you, produces desire in you. It would seem very sterile, but you're saying it's not, because it seems very hermetically sealed.
That's the only thing that produces desire in me is an idea that I have that I like.
I don't understand that.
The only thing that produces a desire within me is an idea that appears, and I like that idea, then I want that idea, and I follow and I take action. And the desires that within me are minimized for some reason, because I stopped feeding them, because I saw their defects. And the other thing is that that the practice has to be continuously.
Yes.
And what I find is this is where it's the most challenging for the most people. Even the people that come here and daily practice, they can practice, and we see it for 3 hours, and there's sharing, and there's stillness meditation, and they experience who they are, and they walk out from here, and they forget, and the habit fall, and now they have to...
Why?
The habit.
Because I say the same thing about my patients, that they will behave the day before they come to see the doctor. They will behave, so the sugar is okay, the blood pressure is okay, but you know that they've been misbehaving because you see them misbehaving outside the clinic. Why does it happen?
Not enough readiness. Not enough readiness.
You mean desire?
Yes, not enough readiness. It's like fruit. All fruits ripe in different times. So not all the lemons ripe at the same time on the tree. So it's ripeness, earnestness, determination, desire. Desire is the cause of it.
Yes. So desire. There is a desire in you of a particular type. It's not a desire for a person or an object or an acquisition. But it's still a desire. It's still a base emotion.
No, it's not emotional at all. It's not rational. Because I see that all living beings desire to be happy always, and I'll stay on the basic of food. If you starve somebody and you give them food and their stomach is full, they're happy, satisfied. So 7 billion people on the planet, or somewhat, I don't know exact the numbers, everybody wants to be happy always. Everyone is doing everything they do to be happy. So you ask people, why do you work, try to save people's life? Because if you save one person, in that moment you feel satisfied, happy. Why do you want to get married? Because if I'll get married, I'll be happy. That's what I imagine. Why do I want to have children? Because if I'll have children, I imagine that I'll be happy. Because the way desire works, desire is an activity of the mind, and then it's supported by the imagination. So if I get what I want, I'll be happy. And I don't recognize that when I get what I want, the desires subside, and the lack of desires enables me to have a glimpse of the happiness, and that happiness is who I am. Yet if I go through the outside, externally, to the objects of the world, it creates a veiling. And I think it's because I achieved something, I'm happy. Because I got this object, I'm happy. That's the illusion. It's not accurate. So that's what I see. Because I see it from within, all around the people can come and tell me, you know what, you're wrong. And you know what I'll tell them? I hear what you say, and that's not what I experience. And if you want to experience something different, and you want to see for yourself, you have to look from within and see for yourself. I cannot make somebody else see. I can only take them to the point of view, and from there they will have to see with their own eyes. So if I see the moon, you cannot see it unless you look at the moon and you actually see it for yourself. This is where it comes. This is why I say people come and I can just be an inspiration or a guide. I'm just a tour guide. This is what I'm working at. I'm guiding people to look within and experience who they are. So the journey is within. Somebody else, there's many tour guides, they take you to the Himalaya. No difference. That's all. And I don't claim I don't claim to be enlightened, and I don't claim to. I just recognize that I am awake. The one who is awake to itself. That's all. Aware. And it's not a thought. And the thought says I am aware. Yet I recognize that the thought that says I am aware is not the awareness. That's all. Ordinary. Ordinary. Stay with ordinary.
Because there is still, it's like people that have had these discussions with you on your site and talk about enlightenment. There is still somebody who recalls this enlightenment. There's still an I there. There is still, whatever I you want to talk about.
It's a thought. I is just a thought, yes. So for communication purposes, I can say I'm hungry, yes?
No, the body is hungry.
So, I recognize that the thought can never eat, so it's never hungry. So I say, I'm hungry, would you like to go and let's make a meal? And you say yes, yet when I speak it, I see that it's not true. So I don't believe that it's real. That's it, I recognize there's a fire hunger in the body, that's all. So I communicate I'm hungry. What about you? Would you like to go and eat some bananas or mango or fruit or papaya? That's all.
But you could say that about everything in life, Alon. You could say
I do.
But as a result, we wouldn't have the diversity of culture and society that we have if everybody
I do not know that. I do not know that. And the fact is, it's not my business what we will have. I notice there is diversity as long as I perceive it. So as long as I perceive it, there's diversity, And when there is no perceiving of anything other than who I truly am, then there's no diversity. There is just awareness, eternal peace. And then the senses perceive objects and they experience eternal peace.
Okay, let me just, we're going to come to a close now, because I know that your body must be hungry.
I didn't know that.
No, I'm the doctor.
Nice.
If individuals pursue this line of thinking, philosophy, way of life, there would be no marriages, there would be no children, there would be no procreation, there would be no society.
I do not know that. This is your conclusion based on imagination. I do not know that.
It's based on what you told me. That you don't perceive a desire for an individual, a person, the need for children, the need for attachment. That translates to a lack of functioning in life. No?
No.
No.
Functioning just happens. The mind says, I'm doing it all. So say, I'm sitting when the body is sitting. I'm walking when the body is walking, and the mind is meanwhile wandering to the past or the future. Yet the mind says, I'm walking, and if I won't think about it, I won't be able to walk. When in fact, thought is wandering, and the body is still walking.
Sure, absolutely. Let's take another example. You have an attraction for somebody, and you stop yourself short and say, no, it's just my mind that is deluding itself into that attraction. So you stop that attraction, right?
Yeah, I don't take action.
You don't take action.
Because I'm not attracted, I'm never attracted to a physical body. I'm attracted to my conceptual image I like about the body. And
Absolutely.
Now I like this conceptual image, so I take action. Yet if I see that and I don't take action, eventually it would not have any power and it subsides. And then I experience peace. It's much more delicious.
No, absolutely. So then what happens is you function as an individual. You don't function as a family or husband and wife or whatever it is, and you don't have children. I'm coming at it from a biological perspective. You then don't perpetuate society. You don't perpetuate a population, surely, if you follow that particular line of thought.
Maybe, I do not know. I do not know. Truly, honestly, I do not know. And it doesn't really matter, because anyway, I recognize that the waking state is just a longer dream than the dreaming state. When you are a little bit either in darkness for some time, if you practice being in the fully dark, you start merging the dreaming and the waking state. You don't know which one is what, and you see they're the same. And also, if you go into silence for some longer period of time, your dreams become very vivid, and then you wake up, you realize you don't know anymore what's the difference, and you come to see that what appears, the waking state, is just a projection of the mind that appears externally because the five senses are open. Yet in the dream, I'm projecting a whole subtle world that is individual to me, and it appears totally real until I wake up. So the concern about not perpetuating in this world means, for me, not perpetuating the dream sounds pretty good. To wake up from the dream, I don't need to perpetuate and feed the dream and look for continuity in the dream, when actually my true nature is continuous, omnipresent. The only reason why the mind is seeking continuity, because it is looking for the source that is continuous in the desires of the objects of the world. It is looking for continuity. This is why I had a desire. I wanted to have something that will continue for many generations to come. What a dream. I'm continuously. Who I am is changeless awareness. So when I fix the attention on that, and the more I reside as that, the experience that I never came, I never move, and I never go. I never was born. I never will die. Because in the experience it is changeless. Nothing ever happened. Yet unless one experiences it, this would be mere theoretical concept. And I understand. What can I say? What can I do? This is why Buddha said, come, sit, observe the breath, look within, and see for yourself. And then they ask him, what will be after, or what they ask him, so what would I get from it? So he says, enlightenment, or the end of suffering, he pointed. And he says, and then what? And then he pointed, find out for yourself. This is all that one can do, and it's again what they desire, and I respect whatever one desire, yet I see that most of the desires of people, collectively, for all of us, is due to ignorance. And we do a lot of harm due to this desire.
Ignorance of what?
Of who I am. I forgot who I am, and I desire so many things, and I'm greedy, and I'm willing to hurt people, and I'm willing to hurt animals, and I'm willing to destroy just because I forgot who I am. I forgot that I am complete, perfectly complete. So I'm looking to refill by parts this completion. It's never going to stop unless the mind rests in this fullness of awareness. Now, each one, whatever they have to go through, they will go through. I'm not trying to convince anyone of anything. And no, on the contrary, somebody would say, you're wrong. I say, you know what, you're right. If whatever serves you in your life, continue. Yet if someone looks within, they realize that their mind is insane, and it serves them temporarily and causes them more harm than good when they identify with their thoughts and ideas and beliefs. Even if it's the ideal belief, then it's mostly conflict-ridden. Conflict.
How so?
When I want something, I don't want what is. And because the ego is driven by desire, I want what I don't have, and I don't want what I have. So when I want what I don't have, it's a conflict-ridden. And this is why there is so much collective negativity and aggression. Because if I want you to be different and you're not, I'm upset now. I'm frustrated. This is aggression. Now I will be either aggressive violently with me, or I take it out to you. This is ignorance. Look what humanity is fighting. For what? They're protecting their belief system. This is not wisdom. This is ignorance. This is not an enlightened society without this technology. This is darkness with technology. So this is what I see. You look around, you see. You anyone that is a little bit, look how much torture, killing, abusing there is on this planet.
Well, it's less than it was before.
I do not know that.
It's true.
I don't know.
But anyway, I agree with you. But one has to always ask a question, and maybe this is the concluding comment. Is through millennia and through the centuries since man became civilized, if you want to use the word civilized, the raw basic emotions have remained unchanged, which makes one assume that there is a biological basis to some of these emotions. You know, the desire to have what somebody else has, the desire to covet, the desire to steal, the desire to better oneself, the desire to compare oneself. We all know, and we've discussed, that all of these are illusions. They're illusions of the mind, illusions of memory, they're illusions of seeing and hearing, and the mind creating all these models in itself. But if one looks historically, Alon, the same thing happens again and again and again and again. In spite of all this, all the religions and all the philosophy, just like you said, you'll have all your workshops and your retreats, and they'll walk out of or they'll drive out of the retreat, and they'll be hooting at each other and shouting at each other. What is it? Is it something that we cannot overcome in the majority of us? That 6.9 billion people, perhaps 100 million, are enlightened or awake. The rest of them just behave like they were in the Paleolithic era.
Yes, there are rare individuals who transcended it. And these rare individuals give us an example to get the mind return into this light. And the ones who follow and make it not a part-time job, a commitment, full commitment for returning the mind to rest into this light, they are the victorious one. All the rest behave like animals. They work to eat and eat to work, all around body identification. Slaves of their desires, slave of their mind. They cannot stop even the insanity of their mind. They have to take all kind of pills and all kind of this is a disease, and we see how much disease there is on the planet, and the disease is mentally and emotionally, and then it comes out physically too. And this is what we see. We see it all across the board, everywhere I walk. We forgot even to live in a unity, together, sharing. More and more individual sharing. There's no sharing. What can I gain instead of giving? And everything, and the majority of the people are blinded by money, which is non-existent and has no real value. Everybody chase it like this is going to give them salvation. It's nonsense. No trading, giving, receiving on what's natural.
But I don't think it's more, Alon. I think it's the same. I don't think that man's greed...
Right, it's the same. You know why? Because the cycle of birth and death doesn't end unless the mind returns to eternal peace. You're right. This is why it's the same. This is why I see the mind just take a different body, just like you change different clothes every day. Every day is just a gap between deep sleep state, means deep sleep state is between two waking states. Death is between two births. And because I've seen past lives, and many people around when they do the work seen it, and there's testimonies of people who were very skeptic and very influenced by Western science. There's someone in the US that was a hypnotherapist, and he started documented by hypnosis different past lives, and it took him many years to reveal it. He recorded like 26 or 27 people, and I see that the mind doesn't need a physical body to continue, and it leaves the physical body in the dream anyhow, and you cannot grasp it and understand it unless you go within. So I realized that the only way out is in. Otherwise there is no way to get out of this maze that the mind created by itself.
The trouble is, a lot of people don't know how to do that. The trouble is, I think increasingly our society has given us crutches, and we therefore increasingly assume that there is a pill, or there is a doctor, or there is something out there that can help them. And we've forgotten the internal tools, because only you can help yourself.
That's right.
The trouble is that a lot of people can't help themselves. That's what I see. You talk about when the fruit is ripened, it will drop, etc. What is it that makes some people more ready than others? I mean, I'm not a...
I see it's evolution.
It's evolution of what?
The mind is not evolved enough. So when people cannot help themselves, I understand it. I understand that they cannot help themselves. So right now, in that moment when they cannot help themselves, they don't need the help. When they'll be able to help themselves, all the help will come into them to help them. Except they need to want. And even people tell me they want, yet their action is exactly opposing what they want. And that's what they have to go through in order to learn what they have to learn and experience what they have to experience. I see that everything happens in a perfect timing, not moment before, not moment after, the moment it happens. So I don't argue with that. I don't fight with that. I just see it, embrace it, and understand. So one can say I'm compassionate about it, except without being attached to it. So being compassion is having this passion, without feeling bad or pity or having this shouldn't happen. No, this is how it is, and this is also going to change. That in their base, their core of their being, everyone is changeless awareness. Whether they come to realize and experience it or not, I do not know. I cannot make it. It's up to them.
Yes, I think I should leave it there. I'd be delighted to come back and converse with you about other things as well, but I think I've taken a lot of your time up this afternoon.
Sounds great. Maybe before we talk again, I invite you to read The Non-Dual Reality, The Lamp of Non-Dual Reality. Take this book, read it, take your time to read it, understand. Means see from within what this book is pointing at. Nobody knows who wrote this book. And Ramana Maharshi was one of the greatest sages in India, or very respectful sage. Recommended this book as a very valuable book. A book just points your attention to look within. That's all. It doesn't. You don't want to adopt any concept from the book. Just read the book and allow it to turn your attention within because of that book, and examine, challenge it from within with your own eye, without the dogmas or anything from the past. Just examine it for the first time, every time from within. And then we can talk, because a lot of the mechanism that is pointed in the book, and it has many layers, and it has depth, is all internally inside you. You don't need science for that. All the knowledge is inside you. So look within and check.
But I can also recommend some books for you.
Thank you.
And then perhaps we can also discuss it from a biological perspective.
Sounds good. I'll be more than happy and open.
Honestly, I think, I will definitely read it, but I would love to encourage you to read a particular, a few easy to understand. It would be just nice to discuss it.
So why don't you send me the name of the book, so I'll take a look if I can get a hold of them.
I'll send you the book if you need it. That's fine. I'll give you the name of the author and take a look and see. I mean, okay. It's very interesting neurobiological research, and I think you would agree. But let's make a plan to meet once I've read this book.
I'll be more than happy to take a look of the book. And I can send you the address as well.
Okay, that's fine. Send me the address. I'll send the book to you.
Sounds great. Thank you very much. All the very best. Thank you for your kindness and openness. Thank you.
And thank you for your time.
Thank you.